Welcome to the Delingpod with me, James Delingpole. And I know I always say I'm excited about this week's special guest, but before we meet him, let's have a word from one of our sponsors. The gold price has been going up again. Why am I not surprised? I'm not a financial advisor, thank goodness. But I think at this time, in these dark times, you'd be mad not to have at least some physical gold and maybe some physical silver too in what you might describe as, if you're ambitious, your portfolio. Gold and silver, if you'd bought them when I first started talking about them, you'd have made a tidy profit by now. And if you'd bought them in the form of coins of sovereigns and you're a UK citizen, you wouldn't even have to pay capital gains on your profits because they count as legal tender, as I had to explain to my bemused accountant the other day. The place to go for physical gold and silver, you don't want paper gold and paper silver, the place to go is the Pure Gold Company. They will either deliver your coins or your bars to your door, direct to your doorstep, or they will store them for you in their vaults in London or in Zurich in Switzerland. You can also have gold as part of your pension. And if you want to sell it quickly, they will do so for you very quickly. So that's the Pure Gold Company. And you will find the hyperlink to their website at the bottom of this podcast because I'm part of their affiliate program. I'm not pushing their product because I think it's dodgy. I own gold, I own silver, and in the form of bullion, I think you'd be mad not to have them. I don't know where it's quite difficult storing them at home. I tend to go for the vault option. But yeah, if you've got a good hiding place, why not? Especially when it all kicks off and you're going to need something tradable to buy your potatoes and rice. Anyway, go to the Pure Gold Company using the affiliate link, hyperlink at the bottom of this podcast. Welcome to the Delingpod, William Ramsey. From
nice to have. Thanks for having me.
LA. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. Close to LAX, west side.
Okay. And what's the weather like at the moment?
Not bad. It's been windy, though. It was windy last night, but it's sunny, bright blue sky here in LA. March 18th.
I don't trust the weather anymore. How far down the weather conspiracy rabbit hole are you?
I'm down the rabbit hole of all conspiracies, so I don't know. I don't trust the weather that much, but I don't trust the weather reports, that's for sure.
I was thinking, I mean, you are a man of many parts. You investigate. Would you say you investigate conspiracy theory stuff? Is that?
I think that's fair. I mean, I guess you can put it in that. I'd like to think that I was more of an alternate historian or something like that. But yeah, I would say it's in what's called the conspiracy realm. I guess if that's the best term.
We'd all like to think of ourselves as alternative historians or whatever, but basically, to the normie world, we're just crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist loons. I'm comfortable with that because they're wrong and we're right.
I agree.
Now, I thought I'd start by talking to you about Aleister Crowley because you know a lot about him. And I sort of veer between various positions on Crowley. I went to the same school as he did, and there was a rumor, I don't know whether it was true or not, that he'd crucified his housemaster's cat in the college chapel. There's a lot of myth making about Crowley. I'm sure a lot of it encouraged by Crowley himself. And what I want to ask you is, first of all, how serious was he? I mean, how influential and important was he in the whole development of the occult, which seems to be everywhere now? I mean, rife in Hollywood, rife in the music industry, politicians probably as well. It's everywhere. Is it Crowley's? Sorry, Crowley. I understand the correct pronunciation. Is it Crowley's fault?
Partially. I mean, I think that it's partially. He's very influential. There was actually, I think, at Cambridge, it was Boris Johnson's wife was doing rituals where they had quotes from Crowley's Leah Sublime, which is probably one of the most grotesque poems written in the English language. So
just a step back there. Boris Johnson's what? His first wife?
I guess it was his first wife. I think it maybe it's his current wife. I can't remember which one it was, but she was at Cambridge, I believe, doing kind of Crowley rituals.
He met his first wife at Oxford, and she was called Allegra Mostynarian. She was a model, and we all sort of envied him for having attracted such a famous beauty. But yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, if people did experiment, especially in the kind of upper echelons of. So what's the poem about?
It was about his one of his what he would call a Scarlet Woman, or one of his paramours at the time, Leah Hersig, and it's just very grotesque. You probably bring it up. It's not really readable in polite company, but it involves all the stuff that Crowley really, the transgressive behavior that he really, took to the extreme. So I think that it's really something else that she's associated with it. But in a larger sense, I do think Crowley really was the most influential occultist in modern history, just because of how his writings were seeded all throughout the Western world, and he's still to today. There's so many of the modern kind of cult groups that either have passed through Crowley or straight out adopted Crowley. So I do think that he's an important topic to research. There's no question about it.
Yeah. So he founded the Ordo Templi Orientis. Is that right?
It was formerly a German secret society, the Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO. He became its head in 1925 after some of the founders died. And then he kind of integrated some of his earlier stuff. But he was in the Golden Dawn, a kind of well-known 19th century ceremonial magical group. And he started something called the Astrum Argentum, which was kind of like, at the time, kind of like a mail order magic training school. But yeah, and also his religion that he founded, he called it Thelema. But
Thelema, yes. When I was into wine, one of my favourite wines was this. Came from a South African vineyard, and it was called Thelema. And I just thought that's an interesting name. It must have been named surely after. Does Thelema have any other references apart from that particular religious cult?
Well, Thelema is a Greek word for will, so I think that's how he adopted it. He kind of was, knew a little bit about languages, enough to adopt Greek words, but I think that really became the encapsulation of his. And also, in his kind of gematria, which words can be transposed into numbers based upon the Kabbalah, it adds up to 93. So for Crowley, it had all kinds of, I would say, magical meaning, that word. Thelema and agape both add up to 93. So you'll see this number 93 kind of distilled kind of almost as a secret number that fellow Thelemites, as they call them, will reference. So 93 is kind of like a coded term.
Okay. And what does it mean?
Well, like I said, will, and then the religion of Thelema is what Crowley started, kind of organized.
Oh, you mean 93 means will?
It transposes to both in the, if you take standard words and break down the numerical value of each letter, and then add those up, they add up to a number. And so what he found, and you kind of can see this in some of his scribblings, he had magical records and things like that, but it added up to 93. So then Crowley shorthanded it. So he had these kind of axioms: do it that will, it shall be the whole of the law. Love under law, love under will, right? And he actually shorthanded. So if you look at his correspondence, he was really a literateur. He wrote magazine articles, poems, religious tracts, all kinds of stuff. But when he would write to his followers, he would transpose love under law, love under will to 93, 93, 93. And you'll see that kind of like if you see some of Jimmy Page's writings from Led Zeppelin, if he writes, he actually uses the same kind of numerical terminology in his writings. He signs things 93, 93, 93. As somebody who is probably a self-admitted Thelemite.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm familiar with some of the significant numbers in the kind of the occult numerology. So 33, obviously we know about 33 and
33,
22.
11, 77. One of the more vague ones is 175, but 11 is really the prime number, I think, of magic, and Crowley's thelemic system is 11, which represents a lot of things. It's actually kind of an ideogram. So if you see it, it symbolizes the coming together of opposites, which is really what the magician's trying to do. And it's the unity of the hexagram and the hexagram and the pentagram, right, which both symbolize the micro and macro universe, so they come together in the magician's ceremonial magic. And you'll see these 11 letter terms, 11 word terms, and things like that all through Crowley's Thelema. So 11 is very, very, very important. It's the prime number of Thelema, and still is a kind of prime number for people who practice maybe black magic or ceremonial magic.
Which seems to be half of your city where you live. I mean, all the movers and shakers.
No question.
They're into all this shit, aren't they? They're really into it.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what's in. They're into kind of sex magic. They're into Crowley. And I think Crowley's promise of what, like, his religion gave people was kind of like power to achieve, do what thou wilt. But also the sex and drugs was a key component of Crowley's personal life and his religion. So he came from kind of a more sterile ceremonial magic background, like these guys who were in the Golden Dawn, and they practiced the magic. But what Crowley kind of figured out, or what kind of his discovery, was to sexualize and use drugs in these magical rituals. And so that's actually how that's how he came to the attention of the OTO, because one of their emissaries came from Germany before World War I, the Great War, and came to his house and said, "You're ripping us off. Like, this is our discovery." I guess they had come to the same questionable insights at the same time. And so that's how Crowley actually connected with some of the early OTO members. And they actually made him kind of the head of the OTO in what they called Ionia, or England at that time. So and so his followers are doing that to today. And then you see all these other guys out there like Ozzy Osbourne or whatever, who had that song, Mr. Crowley. So you see all them kind of perpetuating that thing and this kind of idea of this new kind of era that Crowley promised, which he called the birth of the child, or the age of Horus, or the Aeon. Actually, it's very similar to Hitler. They both had this idea of aeonic change, which is not some kind of cultural change for decades, but for 1,000-year kind of transformation of the world. They had pretty, extreme kind of views at what they wanted to do in their worldview. And that's another interesting element about Crowley, is people think about him as this kind of dabbler magician, but he actually had political designs, and he believed in certain things like the best politics and things like that.
The best politics
was feudalism. So
of course it was.
Yeah, he came out for feudalism, and he believed in homosexuality. He liked the Greek way. So it gets pretty vulgar.
They all do. This is what I've noticed, William, in my journeys down the rabbit hole. The ruling classes, if you want to call them that, they much prefer homosexual, certain men anyway, are much more into homosexual sex than heterosexual sex. It seems to be a thing. You look at Lord Mountbatten, for example, massive pederast. I think probably quite a lot of the males in the royal family are. A lot of the sort of the upper class people I know of seem to, they've got their wives for the kind of, for the purpose of breeding, but for the purpose of pleasure, they They have men.
I think that, yeah. And I think that was the case. Crowley started off early. So when he was at Cambridge, he kind of had this relationship with males like Paulet. But he was kind of like more polyamorous. I think that he also had women and men, but I think that he was way ahead. But yeah, Mountbatten was like an advisor to King Charles III. Like this is a very close relationship between those two. So
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, I mean, he was one of his two mentors, wasn't he? Lawrence van der Post and Dickie Mountbatten, his beloved. What I can't remember what relation he was, but he absolutely loved Lord Mountbatten, which kind of says a lot about. It tells us something about Charles, I think, that he liked this rather arrogant figure with with his seamy sexual taste. By the way, before we go on, William, I suddenly realised I owe you an apology. I've suddenly remembered who you're talking about with regards to Boris Johnson. I got confused because I was thinking Oxford and I was thinking Cambridge. It wasn't his first wife. You're absolutely right. It's the current wife. The current wife was into that kind of dodgy occult ceremonial stuff. I'm not sure whether she did it. I don't think she was at Cambridge, was she?
I don't know. What was her name? There's an article on like Daily Mail about it.
Yeah, exactly. She's called Carrie. I don't think she got into Cambridge, but she may have done. Carrie.
There's an article about her. Gosh, let me see. Boris Johnson.
I mean, there are theories on her that she's basically was placed there to be his kind of controller.
It's in the Daily Mail. I don't know if you can show. Are you able to share the screen?
No, I'm just reading Wikipedia. She went to Warwick.
Okay,
so Warwick University. So she wouldn't have been clever enough to get into Cambridge. But yeah, she was the one. She had all sorts of associations. I think she worked for something run by the Clintons or something. One of those green think tanks. You know, I mean, she's
sure.
Yeah, she's part of that. Anyway, going back to Aleister Crowley. It's very
Here's the link to the article. Carrie Simons. So that was the satanic sex cult. So that was from 2018. And you'll see the Leah Sublime down there.
Okay. Really I'm going to have to read this disgusting poem.
You want to read it? I don't. If you do, it's something else. You can read it.
No, I'll read it in the privacy of my own home. I'll probably feel sullied by it afterwards. But it's interesting what you say. So I studied English literature at university, and I remember reading, when studying Yeats, for example, and you'd read about Maud Gonne and the Wild Swans at Cool, and these places where he stayed with the sort of Anglo-Irish ascendancy with these titled folk and got involved in the Order of the Golden Dawn and stuff. And he was quite a good-looking man, Yeats. But you think that the Order of the Golden Dawn was relatively sedate and chaste compared with what followed?
No doubt. And I think that people knew Crowley was kind of like a bad apple in there. And there's kind of a famous battle between Crowley and Yeats, both dressed in magical garb. And there's two different sides to the story. Yeats claims that he kicked Crowley down the stairs, and then Crowley claims that he had some magical war with Yeats, who was a known ceremonial magician, and that he triumphed over him. But I tend to believe Yeats' story more than Crowley's. But they knew each other. And yeah.
Didn't they have sex?
I don't know. I don't know if Yeats was a homosexual. I think that Crowley used to. Well, Crowley was such a jerk, but he knew. How do I say this? Yeats had problems performing sexual functioning, and Crowley would berate him publicly about it. And
did he?
Apparently, Yeats. It was well known enough for Crowley to know it, but Yeats had some kind of. He had some kind of procedure where his male member would work better, and Crowley knew about it and teased him about it.
Did he?
Yes.
That's unfortunate, isn't it? if you're
especially
a
if
poet
it's public. Crowley was such a jerk. Like, he would always insult everybody publicly and have public spats. But he was kind of like the media hog, social media hog of his day. He was always trying to do public presentations and big fanfare type things to get in the papers. And so he was always kind of like jabbing people. But yeah. Anyway, he got kicked out of the Golden Dawn, by the way. He actually had a former kind of like his mentor. He actually had a battle with him that's in the court system. Like, the records are there in the UK. The guy's name his magical name was MacGregor Mathers. And you make an oath when you go into the Golden Dawn to not divulge any of the secrets, right? You make a kind of secret seal. Very common in secret societies. Crowley, of course, broke it and published some of the Golden Dawn stuff. And then Mathers got angry, and the judge was amused by this kind of magical battle that took place in the courts between Crowley and Mathers. And it's in my book, Prophet of Evil. So it's kind of a funny aside.
Where did all this come from? I mean, was Crowley born into a bloodlines family?
I think the opposite. He was born into a family known as the Plymouth Brethren. They were kind of a more extreme version of John Darby, right? John Darby was kind of he believed that there were certain sequences and that God was laying out ideas to people in certain times. And so he was part of like this, he was actually part of a subset of the Plymouth Brethren, which is the exclusive brethren. So his parents were very religious, observant Christians who would read the Bible. And Crowley didn't get a lot of opportunities to get away from that when he was young, as he writes. By the way, Crowley had a very long autobiography, which he called it's called Confessions, but he called it an autohagiography, which is kind of like a biography of a saint. So it's kind of the same theme of Crowley's kind of underhanded humor. But anyway, so he couldn't get away from his parents. His father died when he was 14. There actually was a Crowley ale. I don't think it's for sale anymore in the UK. But his father made a lot of money through the pub system of England at the time, beer and also selling food and things like that. So Crowley was wealthy. He was the only child. And he only
the parents were, despite being strictly observant, sort of Plymouth Brethren, extreme branch thereof, nevertheless made money out of booze.
Correct. Very strange. And I think his dad was a teetotaler too. But his dad was also, and you can actually see kind of old pictures online of Crowley ale carts and things like that being sent around, like before, the advent of the automobile. But so that was kind of an interesting aspect. And Crowley only went to these exclusive brethren kind of what we would call private schools here in the States. But he went to, things. And then it was really a rough kind of 19th century, another brick in the wall kind of schools where there's a lot of abuse and spankings and beatings. And it's strange that he went through. He apparently, according to him, he almost died from kind of the abuse that he took at some of these schools. And then he had private tutors all the way up before he went to Cambridge. But when his mother died, the inheritance of Crowley was very substantial. It was something like £20 million or something. Like, it wasn't a joke. So Crowley was always a member of the British aristocracy at the apex of the British Empire in the 19th century. Right. And he never worked. So his attitude was always classist, and he always saw himself as an aristocrat or an elitist. All the way to the end when he was living in Hastings at kind of for him, kind of maybe a mid-level boarding house where he died in 1947. But he never worked a day in his life. He actually frittered away, and he admits this to himself. Like, he never understood having to like save money. So he always just asked for money, and it was granted to him. So he would spend money in the most strange ways, like costumes, trips around the world. He traveled, like circumnavigated the globe twice. So you can see his writings. He's kind of hard to pin down because he moves a lot. He did 2 substantial mountain climbing escapades in present-day India, I guess it is. It's Kanchenjunga, and then the other one's known as K2, or Chogo-ri.
Wait, he climbed K2?
He tried to. He tried to climb both of them. He was a mountain climber. Like, he spent time in the Alps, and he tried to climb them. The second one was a disaster, and there were people who went into an avalanche. There was an avalanche that covered some of the Sherpas, or the pack guys, and Crowley just sat in his tent and didn't help. And so his reputation was just incinerated in the mountaineering community, because it's a global community at that time.
Yes.
There's people from France and things on these expeditions. They were, other kind of aristocrats and elite type people. But it scorched his mountaineering rep, and that was kind of the end of it. But there are actually really good pictures of the second expedition of Crowley and things like that. They are available. And it's really an interesting time point of Crowley, and you see a different aspect of his life. When he was at Cambridge, he said he was really interested in three things: mountaineering, poetry, and magic. He's white hot for all those, and that's really the truth.
Was he friends with anyone famous at Cambridge?
At Cambridge. I don't think so offhand. He didn't take a degree. He kind of had it. He saw himself as as other luminaries who didn't take a degree because he had contempt for them. It's kind of an interesting story. But he was a big admirer of Sir Richard Burton. And he actually took on a lot of those characteristics of Burton. For people who don't know, maybe in the States or something, Sir Richard Burton was one of the really early global adventurers. I think he spoke incredible amount of language. He's really a philologist. I don't even know the word for it. But, I mean, he was one of the first non-Muslims to do the Hajj. So he went to Mecca and Medina and tried to find where the Nile started. He went to Lake Victoria. There's a lot coming back to England. There was a lot of controversy around him. He actually came to the United States because he was interested in Mormonism, of all things. And Crowley kind of had that adventurer's element to him. So he saw himself as an adventurer like this. But I think he said he wanted not to take a degree like Lord Byron, who was also there, I think it was at the time.
Yeah, I can see that. There was a sort of tradition of a degree called a gentleman's third, which was the lowest class of degree, although, of course, it'd be even more distinguished to fail, not even take your... I mean, I can see why he would have... Because it sounds like he doesn't come from an actual aristocratic background, but he was mixing with the moneyed classes and therefore was able to live like them and probably wanted to ape their behavior.
I think that's absolutely correct. He kind of said he was aware of all the people who went to Cambridge: Francis Bacon, Newton, Russell, Darwin, Rothschild, King Edward the Seventh, studied at Trinity with Crowley at the time, and he said, "I was part of the glories of the past, and I made a firm resolution to be one of the glories of the future." So that's what he did.
So when I was slightly more naive about the world, and I knew I'd heard of Crowley from David Bowie, for example, from Quicksand and stuff. So I knew he was a name that one should know about, and of course, having been at the same school with him, there was that tradition as well. But I never really thought that the stuff he was doing actually worked, that I thought that he was just probably some chancer who was inventing these rituals in order to use them as an excuse to get women and have sex with them and take drugs and stuff. But what I understand about the world now, I understand that the supernatural is very real and very powerful. He must have been quite... I mean, what was his end game? What was he hoping to achieve by summoning these demons and stuff?
Information, insights, and power. So he was really very often doing rituals for that purpose, is to have contact with the outer world. Like Bowie, Bowie was a ceremonial magician as well, knew a lot of the stuff, astral travel. So one of the earlier things Crowley would do is astrally travel. He said he could contact people globally. But I think he was really trying to seek knowledge. And this is like the primary event in his life happened in 1904 in Egypt, where he supposedly had his wife, her name was Kelly, last name was Kelly. She supposedly said, they're waiting for you. And he received this book he called the Book of the Law. which was broken down in 3 parts, and it was supposedly translated to him or given to him by an entity that he called Iwas, which translates to the Lord of the Air, which if you know the Bible, you know kind of who is the Lord of the Air. He later said that it was Satan or Lucifer in Magic and Theory and Practice. He admits it later, but it's kind of an interesting Bible. It has all kinds of interesting quotes, like we talked about 11. Inside the book of the law is, those who are of us are of the number 11. So it has this kind of like impact, but it also shows it's against all religion. I poke out the eyes of Muhammad. I spit on your crapulous creeds. It's very contemptuous. And it kind of, yeah. So, and there's a lot of blood drinking, a lot of instructions on making cakes of light and things like that. So I think Crowley's ultimate, to answer your question, he's trying to find insight and power and really self magnification, is to really, I think he really wanted to immortalize himself, and I think he succeeded.
Okay. So when we're younger, you're a Christian, as am I, and my understanding of the world is very different from Crowley's, and my understanding of the purpose of life is very different from Crowley's. I can see when you're a young man making your way in the world, that the things that Crowley sought are quite desirable things. You kind of want to get on in life. You want status. You want to be able to charm girls or boys into bed. You want money. You want toys. You want respect. You want all these things. So I can understand the allure of this stuff to sort of younger people who don't really understand the nature of the supernatural world, that like there are consequences for this. But later on in life, what was Crowley's understanding? In fact, not just Crowley, but all these people. Do they not understand the deal that all these earthly pleasures are temporal, and that there is a price to be paid for gaining them? How do they justify that to themselves? How do they?
I think it's a good question, and I think a lot of people ask that question of Crowley. How did he change? He actually said, I want to become the chief of staff of the devil. But he actually writes, and he's acknowledging, I don't know why I changed. I just did, and I never went back. So I think that it's a very interesting question. He was aware. He actually says something very interesting. He's like, I was aware of all of the creeds of Christianity. I knew the book backwards and forwards. I just chose not to follow it for whatever reason. So I think that he was among the damned. And he would write stuff like, I ran into somebody else who's just as damned as I am. So this is self-acknowledgement that you're an enmity with the Bible or Christ, And he knows this, and he sees other people, and they share in their kind of hellish lifestyle or whatever. And so it's very interesting. One of the interesting things, there's another biography from a pro-Crowley person called Perderamo. And that was Crowley's magical name, I Will Endure. And a lot of people, the topical level of Crowley, or maybe in my opinion, a superficial level, they see Crowley as a dabbler, just like you said. He was using magic to get things in the world. But I think that he really did endure to the end. He was writing Magic Without Tears, his last book, which is a series of missives to people interested in magic. So I think he was really committed to this. And I think he was this is a very well-educated guy with literal first-rate, top 100% verbal and writing skills. He was a great writer. And he almost never really he wasn't one of those pained writers who went back through and had to rewrite stuff. It's almost like automatic writing. That's how gifted he was. Whether his poetry is any good is another question. I think he's a second-rate poet. But it's just incredible how he really kept going all the way to the end. And
but
it is interesting. There was one, I'll tell you an interesting story that ties Crowley to the current state. He had people visiting him. He had a lot of followers. There was the head of the current Wiccan movement, Gardner, knew Crowley. There was another guy from Typhonian OTO, which also sat at Crowley's knee. And there was another guy, his name was McMurtry from the States, who visited Crowley in Hastings. And he tells a story of Crowley being at this, and a bunch of Christmas carolers come to to sing Christmas songs to Crowley. And Crowley's like, "Get out of here, you bastards!" Blah, 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 and kicks him out. And so that was the first thing for McMurtry, like, oh, Crowley really is a bastard. He really is a satanic bastard all the way to the end, even when he's a literal addled junkie. Like, he's doing massive amounts of heroin every day and relying upon people from the U.S. for his livelihood because he frittered away all his money. But this guy, McMurtry, went back to the States and claimed to be Crowley's heir. There were a couple, you would know the name Tom Dryburgh. He was supposedly appointed Crowley's heir and then rejected it. And then when when Crowley died, Dryburgh went to go get papers and things that because he had made a written, and this is according to Simons, another biographer, he had written his loyalty oath to Crowley. And so he wanted to get that proof and get it out. And so he went to the actual, Simons became Crowley's archivist. And he went to Simons, he grabs this piece of paper and runs away. But Dryburgh is a whole nother story. It's a tie-in to the modern age. Anyway, my point is McMurtry's meeting with Crowley. McMurtry comes back to the States. He's in Bay Area, and he has these conversations with a lot of different people, a lot of famous people in the counterculture here. But the LaVey knows McMurtry. McMurtry's the head of the OTO. There's all kinds of lawsuits. He's friends with Robert Anton Wilson, but he's having a conversation about UFOs with a guy by the name of Jacques Vallée. And it's in my book, Children of the Beast. And it's an interesting conversation where they're talking about entities, which is the current kind of zeitgeist right now. People are talking about UAPs and UFOs. Turns out Jacques Vallée was just on Joe Rogan, like the #1 podcast in the world, with tens of millions of views. So you can see this kind of Vallée knew McMurtry, who knew Crowley. So it's kind of an interesting personal
sort of apostolic succession.
It is like that. It really is. It's true.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to move on to that in a moment. Once we've exhausted Crowley himself, because I'm aware, and I know you've written about this, the connections between the US rocket programs and the people who were hanging out there who were Satanists, occultists. There's a connection, isn't there, between aliens, as we've been encouraged to think of them, and the people who were involved in the early rocket program.
I think so. These entities, they call them the Greys, but Crowley was really one of the first people on record to have this so-called Grey contact. He did something called the Alamantra working while he was in Manhattan in the U.S. He was working for the British government as a spy, as pretty much acknowledged. There's a really good book called Secret Agent 666 about that verifies that Crowley was an intel asset. Probably was all the way back to Cambridge. But he did this working and made a drawing of something that looks like this gray alien. He called it Lamb, which is an honorific. It's kind of one of the confusing things about Crowley, because everything's inverted. So everything he says Lord and stuff from a Christian perspective, you're thinking, oh, he's thinking that Jesus. No, he's talking about Satan, So everything's upside down. He calls the Christians the Black Brotherhood, right? So it doesn't sink in. You have to kind of invert your thinking to understand Crowley. Anyway, that's in the back of his. He kind of put together a encyclopedia called Equinox. And so he has a drawing of this gray alien. And so then, this is kind of moved off into the UFO zeitgeist. There's this whole thing about Crowley. I mean, the Crowley, people reference that Lamb and all these conversations I've had with other people. And you see this all the way up with Whitley Strieber, people contacting these same kind of looking entities that Crowley was coveting conversation with. He had Iwas, Lamb, the Wizard, Corazon, supposedly, all these other weird entities. He did this ritual up in Scotland at his manor, Boleskine Manor. It was called the I can't remember
horrible.
But he had ghosts
Boleskine
coming.
House, which Jimmy Page later bought,
Correct,
and then subsequently burnt down. Because there were so many kind of unleashed spirits there that no one could live there. The guy who I think acted as his caretaker went mad.
Yeah, he tried to kill his wife with an axe or something. Like, there's really bad mojo associated with that place. And anyway, so like Crowley was always having these entities and things like that. And I think that's kind of like what was his spiritual life. Like, people say he's not spiritual, but that was his kind of, he's not trying to contact Christ or angels or something like that.
But so, I mean, dying in it wasn't a bedsit, was it? It was a boarding house in Hastings.
Boarding house. I forgot the name of it, but it was in Hastings. It's very south UK.
It's not exactly the crowning glory of an illustrious career, is it? It's sort of fading out, being bailed out by your acolytes in America, having spent all your money, probably having lost all your youth. Well, obviously, lost all his youthful vigor and stuff. I mean, it's like the end of Dr. Faustus, where he's had his time in the sun, and now the devil comes to take his due, his side of the bargain, and he ends up in sort of squalor and relative obscurity.
Yeah, it's very strange because he dies, he's cremated, his ashes come to the States and disappear, so he has no like burial place where people know. And I think he wrote a poem about the last of his life. He said, "Bury me in a nameless grave that the earth will not remember my shame." Like, he kind of self-acknowledged. At the very end of his life, he kind of goes, am I insane? Why did I make these decisions? And there's rumors that he was in a mental institution. I haven't confirmed this, in Switzerland, which is a known place, like high-end place to send people for rehabilitation, or if they have a nervous breakdown or something like that. But yeah, it's kind of like Dr. Faustus. It's like he's made his deal with the devil, and now he's got to take a seat in it. But to go back to your earlier statement about Parsons, according to Crowley, was this guy involved in JPL. He really started the JATO, Jet Assisted Takeoff, right? So this is the beginning of jet technology. But he was also a full-on Crowleyite or Thelemite. And he lived in Pasadena, in kind of the old LA, where they literally made these huge mansions. Like, he had a mansion and he'd invite all these people there. And he was part of the culture, and L. Ron Hubbard's involved with him, which is who loved Crowley too, but that's a whole nother story. It's all kind of covered in Children of the Beast, because the children, as Crowley had this idea of magical children, so he knew they weren't really his children. He had 5 real kids, but who he never cared for. He was a terrible parent.
Well, wasn't one of them Barbara Bush?
Well, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, well,
she looks a lot like him.
We've got to go there. We can
go there. Let me finish this train of thought. So JPL, Jack Parsons, he thinks he's following. There's something in the book of the law that says there's somebody who will follow after me. So people who were always like into Crowley take that mantle upon themselves. So Parsons believes he's the one who comes after. Hubbard thinks he's the one who comes after. But Parsons is part of the Suicide Squad you mentioned earlier, who were in the Arroyo Seco, just blowing stuff up. They called them the Suicide Squad because they assumed they were going to die. And it was Parsons, Molina, which is a Czech last name, and then a guy named Foreman. Just really good pictures of them, too, doing stuff. But when these rockets would go off or jets take off, Parsons would recite Crowley's Hymn to Pan. Probably his best known, his best poem, maybe other than Leah Sublime. But it is interesting if you want to have ties to the present day. Molina, who was part of the Suicide Squad, his son married Ghislaine Maxwell's sister. And so they're involved in this thing here, which is kind of this new kind of tech forward-thinking place it's an institute. It's called the Santa Fe Institute. But it's kind of like an SLN. What's the other place that's in really far north Scotland that supposedly has magical powers, and a lot of like New Age people go there? Findhorn? It's kind of like a Findhorn. Are you familiar with Findhorn?
I've heard of it.
Okay.
I mean, Scotland seems to have an awful lot of dark magic stuff going on.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I mean, there's even a pyramid in the grounds of Balmoral, the royal family's Scottish.
I'm not surprised.
Estate. I think
Savile had an estate up in Scotland too, didn't he?
Who did?
Savile, Jimmy Savile.
Jimmy Savile did indeed have and of course you've got the Scottish rite of Freemasonry. I think it's absolutely
Roslyn Chapel, all that stuff. Yeah.
something very weird about.
When Savile died, somebody went to his house up in Scotland and wrote, "The beast is dead." Like, he called him a beast, like what Crowley referred to himself as the beast from the Book of Revelation.
It's interesting, isn't it, that you've got these public figures, well-known characters, who are sold to us as Jimmy Savile was sold to us as a northern disc jockey, who later became this kind of celebrity and friend of the royal family and fixer and stuff. So you had sort of lovable, eccentric, well, semi-lovable with his cigar and his white hair. And then you had David Bowie doing his, being David Bowie and so on. But actually, these people had another side to them. They were practicing wizards or magicians, or weren't they? They were really into this stuff.
Yeah, no. I mean, the Black Star is really incredible from Bowie. Like, it's like an expression of his knowledge of ceremonial magic, opposites. And it shows like he was one of those people who pushed the culture too. If you remember, he was kind of a gender bender back when that was really edgy. He was dressed up as like a feat or effeminate. So that's something else.
He was a change agent, wasn't he? I mean,
I would say so. I think he was just like so many people in the 60s were. And that was actually when Crowley said the birth of the child, the birth of his new era or aeon was going to start, was the 60s, the birth of the age of horse, so to speak. Coincides with the age of Aquarius. Savile, interestingly, I mean, he engaged in unspeakable acts, but he died, I think he's buried in Scotland. I don't know where he's buried, but he's buried at 45 degrees like a witch. So he's facing east. And it says everything about him. He was the seventh son of his parents, too, by the way. So the seventh son is another kind of 77 and indicator of a kind of a black magician type.
Well, this sort of brings me on to the next. We may come back to Crowley, but I am gobsmacked. Is the only appropriate word, really, to realize just how embedded the occult is in celebrity culture. We've given a few examples already, but it's absolutely rife, isn't it? It's rife in Hollywood. You've got, I mean, the Kabbalah studies that people do, pretending it's just a kind of an innocent thing. You've got a friend of mine who did one of my favorite podcasts. He's dead now. He was a very successful painter, and he had many sort of very rich clients who would commission him to do these sort of pictures of their houses and their gardens. So he would go and stay. So he went and stayed with Oprah Winfrey, for example, did her place, did a few others. He was down the rabbit hole like us, and so he saw things and understood things from a not normie perspective. And he told me that I think it was James Cameron had told him that he would never let his kids go into Hollywood, never let them go into, because it was so corrupt and so evil. They didn't want them touching these people. And this is the impression I get. You've got, and it's not just Hollywood, by the way, you've got the entertainment, the music industry as well. So you've got Taylor Swift, who looks very suspiciously like, who's that witch? She's obviously a clone of that witch. Something LaVey?
Oh, Zena LaVey, yeah.
Zena LaVey.
Like Zena LaVey, yeah.
Have you not been down that rabbit hole?
I've seen them. I mean, the similarities are there. I never knew that she was connected
bizarre,
to him.
Isn't it? In the same way, okay, while we're here, Barbara Bush and Aleister Crowley. Come on.
Male, female carbon copy to me. They look the same head. Crowley was Irish. He kind of had like a block, like a very square dome, like maybe not as olive shaped. He hid it by, he would wear scarves and stuff like that. But she has that same kind of big head that he had. And you can see those pictures. When I mentioned those pictures of the expedition, the mountaineering, you see Crowley with his shirt off and you go, wow, he had a big head and not a very, broad shoulders or anything like that. And so she kind of has that. But the story about Barbara Bush goes back to the 1920s when Paris used to be nice. And that was a kind of people would, literary figures and cultural figures would do almost like a Hajj to Paris to spend time there. Crowley was part of that literary culture. He ran into Hemingway and so many other peoples. Rodin, who was a famous sculptor, people might know his name.
Yeah,
the thinker. Exactly. He's actually, Rodin in Rhyme is one of Crowley's poetry books where he wrote about Rodin. So he's kind of at the circle of that, maybe famous in his own right, but he had just been kicked out of Italy. His Abbey of Felima was defunct. He was actually kicked out of Italy by Mussolini.
Was he?
Yeah. So he was, it's in the papers there. And he was in Sicily. He was at his Abbey of Felima in Cefalù, which is a little town at the north of Sicily. He was kicked off. He goes to see his friend Harris, and he's doing this he has all these rituals that they're kind of, I'm glad you have to decipher what he's saying because he's using poetic terms. So he doesn't quite list it out in a very scientific and easily understandable manner because he's concealing it, right? He's deliberately keeping it concealed to those who are initiated and can decipher. So some of these things you'll read and you'll be like, I don't know what he's talking about. You're not supposed to know. He's doing really gnarly sex stuff. But when he was in Paris, he was doing something called ECL, which you can go in detail. But basically, the idea is to have as much sex as possible, and then your spirit leaves your body. But you need to have servitors. You need to have kind of like ritual, people helping you to achieve this state. And so the rumor is that Barbara Bush's mom, which we know who she is her name is Pauline Pierce. She's part of the Pierce family, like this huge, like wealthy investment banking family, Barbara Bush is. But anyway, her mom used to go to France and do this. These are bored housewife types, Crowley attracted a lot of bored rich housewives.
Yes, exactly.
Anyway, she's probably, the rumor is it's Harris. His girlfriend's name is O'Hara and Pierce and some of these other people around Crowley helping him do this ritual. And she comes back and she's pregnant and she has a kid. You can see her children and there's one that doesn't look like the other and her name is Barbara Pierce and who became Barbara Bush. And the relationship between George and Barbara is interesting. It's more of like an arranged elite arranged marriage because they're so young. I think that she was 16 when she met George at 18. And sometimes, wealthy people, they want to keep the money in power in the familial line.
Sure. So
they're married off just like kings or queens are. So I think that was kind of it. And it makes kind of perfect sense. I don't think it's provable. Visually, you can kind of go, wow, this is the same kind of looking person. Same weird head, same eyes, like the strange eye look. But then it would make sense going all the way up to 9/11, right? 11's Crowley's major number. And this huge event under George Bush Jr., 9/11 happens, right?
Mm.
The first plane to hit the Twin Towers was plane 11 too.
Yeah, they love their signs and symbols, these people. I think it goes back, obviously it predates Crowley. He was obviously the fashionable exponent of the arts.
He called him, it's interesting you say that because he called himself the priest to the princes. So it's almost like he's acknowledging he's not one of these like princelings who is from titled, heraldric background. He's a priest to them. So he's the one with the knowledge of how to do these things. Keep the peasants in their place. The slaves shall serve is what he said. So he's justifying these people's lifestyle from somebody who is very knowledgeable about he knew almost everything about the occult. That's why people go back to Crowley because he compiled so much stuff in his Magic and Theory and Practice and these other books. So I think that that's really what he's doing is he's this kind of servitor. He also said something kind of infamous too, is like, have nothing to do with the muck of the mire. find the diamonds and polish them. So he didn't think that like going to the lower classes or ignorant people was really, he wasn't an egalitarian at all. He was the opposite of that, an elitist. So he would try to find other school people. So people who he was bringing into Thelema usually came out of two schools, Oxford and Cambridge. And so he had one follower who died at Thelema. His name was Raoul Loveday, who also, I think, came out of Oxford. And he was supposed to be Crowley's like heir, like really intelligent guy, but he got sick at Thelema, at the Abbey, and died. He was also not in great health, but there's like suspicious whether he drank cat's blood and died. But
the thing that people are quite coy about, I haven't heard it mentioned, is we know, don't we, that ritual sacrifice of children is rife in elite circles. Presumably, Crowley must have engaged in this kind of stuff as well.
I don't think he writes about it. He writes about the perfect sacrifice as an 8-year-old boy in Magic and Theory and Practice, but a lot of Crowley...
8-year-old boy?
Correct. Yeah, a male child of perfect innocence has the most power. That's what he wrote about. But I actually just published an article on my social media called Crowley and Human Sacrifice, because I've had the misfortune or mispleasure of reading so much Crowley. I know where he also talks about it. So he talks about it in one of his kind of hard to decipher ritual things called Liber 66, right? Which is divisible by 11. Talks about child sacrifice. He also wrote a play called The World's Tragedy. And the world's tragedy is Jesus Christ. So it's a direct assault upon Christianity. And the person who's going to fulfill everything, at the beginning it has child sacrifice on the altar, right? But the person who's going to fulfill and take the place of the Messiah is Crowley. So he writes himself in this messianic kind of thing. But it involves child sacrifice. So it pervades a lot of his writing, this kind of hint. And then you wonder, like, there's rumors of children missing at Abbey of Thelema. And it gets kind of dark. Like, is this really happening? Did Crowley engage in human sacrifice is really, I think, a valid question, because he writes about it. And the people, his advocates, write this off as like symbolic, right? But this is a symbol of like some kind of sex magical ritual or something like that. I don't think it's symbolic at all. I think it's pretty clear what he's writing about, especially when you put it in context with other things. We know Crowley, like you mentioned this cat that supposedly was killed. We know Crowley killed a cat and murdered it because he writes about it. He wrote about it in his biography. I can give it to you. He left Ybor School. I don't know if Ybor School still exists, but he says, I've been told a cat has 9 lives. I deduced that it must be practically impossible to kill a cat. As usual, I became full of ambition to perform the feat. I therefore caught a cat, having administered a large dose of arsenic. I chloroformed it, hanged it above the gas jet, stabbed it, cut its throat, smashed its skull, and when it had been pretty thoroughly burnt, drowned it and threw it out the window that the fall might remove the ninth life. In fact, the operation was successful. I had killed the cat. I remember that all the time I was generally sorry for the animal. I simply forced myself to carry out the experiment in the interest of pure science.
Yeah. That's how it all started, I guess. Yeah, no, I don't believe that the so-called wickedest man in the world, who wrote the rule book for the next generation of occultists, dark magicians, how he would not have done the thing that they all do now. You only have to look at what was going on in Laurel Canyon, for example, even before the fake CIA sponsored music scene happened. What the Hollywood moguls were doing in those big houses with their underground tunnels. You live in a dark place.
It's pretty dark. There's a lot of dark people. There's a lot of like the imprints of hardcore occultism and international intrigue are all over the place. Like the Getty family's all over. That family's a mess. They're the ones who kind of sponsored our governor. Like he actually was in business with somebody from the Getty thing. J. Paul Getty was something else. J. Paul Getty Jr. was something else. Like he would sponsor flights for Kenneth Anger to fly all around, and that's Lucifer Rising. And J. Paul Getty Jr. was kind of in the cultural milieu of 60s, 70s, London, heroin user who slept in a tomb. Like, these guys would do birthing, death, and resurrection rituals, being birthed back into the cult, much like Skull and Bones, right? So Bush, that's the whole Bush connection. So you almost see like two families of occultists fusing together in Barbara and George.
Well, I was thinking that as you said it, that one thing one learns about the bloodlines families is that they like to keep it in the bloodlines. So they tend to, because it's not just the concentration of wealth thing, it's also they can talk about their secrets safely with one another because they're bound by the same amoral satanic code, if you like. I mean, I think it's the case with all these families.
I think you're right. And it's interesting. It ties into, believe it or not, Kubrick, who, like, in 1999 put out Eyes Wide Shut, secret magic ritual, Fraternitas Saturnus, whatever you want to call that ritual event, with 11 women, all right? So they're like the ritual implements, like you're talking about Barbara Bush's mom, right? Where they're supposedly getting impregnated, where she got possibly impregnated, or she was a product of a ritual impregnation, right? It's unbelievable how it ties into Eyes Wide Shut. And then Kubrick dies in very important year for films, by the way. Really strange how they all came out around 1999. Fight Club, Ninth Gate, Eyes Wide Shut. But Kubrick conveniently dies before he can explain everything that he put in there, or that was left there. Because there's a lot of stuff ties into Bob Hope. I mean, it's really incredible. He left. Whoever was doing, he made the final decision. He's the director. But whoever was doing the research for Kubrick may not be him. It may be some other people, like a group.
Well, Kubrick was big friends with Getty, wasn't he?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if he was. I'm
sure
not familiar with that. The junior or the senior?
Whichever the Anglophile. There was an Anglophile one that had the sponsored cricket match. It had cricket matches at his big house.
Yeah, that's the junior.
Yeah. You see,
that's kind of common in the American elite, actually. They all kind of the WASPs all looked back to England as kind of like this kind of aristocrats and people they want to model. Actually, the people who started the country, really. They were kind of like the third-rate offspring of the English aristocracy. They were competing and copied them and did all kinds of stuff, but they weren't part of it. So it kind of makes sense that the Civil War actually really occurred because they were never going to be part of the British ruling class, and so they had to start their own thing here in the States.
Well, I think that when you start drilling down, you realize that at the highest levels, the British Empire and the American Empire are one and the same. They're controlled by the same people. The families are much more connected than they let on. So everyone's got a cover story. Up until
recently, I don't know if you've heard my shows on the Pilgrim Society, but that is really the connection all the way to today. Like, there are people in the U.S., opinion makers or influencers who are members of the Pilgrim Society. Tucker Carlson is never admitted as a member of the Pilgrim Society, which is run, who's the big patron? King Charles III.
Okay, so tell me a bit about. We'll come off the occultism for a moment.
Well, it's part of it. It actually kind of ties in because it goes back to the elite kind of control and fusing, but it's really part of the Anglo-American aristocracy. I mean, for people who don't remember, the British Empire was so influential all the way up until World War II, banking and so much stuff. And then they kind of want, it seems like the elites of Britain recognized the U.S. was going to be a giant, right? Like an economic and financial giant. And it seems like they set up this Pilgrim Society, which is basically the Pilgrims. But it was 1902 was the British one that started in 1903. And it's really an elite secret society. Well, it's not really that secret, but it's really an elite club. And they only meet in two different places, London and New York City. But it's all the elite. I mean, it's almost like a who's who of elite of aristocrats from the U.S. We supposedly don't have aristocrats in the U.S., which is transparently a joke. But that's the way we're taught, But
pilgrims for what?
That's a good question. They actually use as their symbol, I think it was the pilgrim to, was it Canterbury Place? Wasn't there a pilgrimage to Canterbury? I think they used that.
Yeah. Canterbury Cathedral was where Thomas à Becket was martyred.
Right. So I think that there used to be kind of like a pilgrim through there. And I think that's the symbol they use as to kind of fuse together, because the pilgrims were the ones who came to the U.S. and landed on the Mayflower, right?
I'm going to Google it, but I'll tell you something interesting. I went to the house of somebody who owns lots of Crowley stuff because his family was connected with the Crowleys. His relative, this guy's ancestor, this friend of Crowley's, was a quite famous author who wrote under the name of Henry Green, and the family was called York. And
yeah, Gerald York. I know Gerald York. He's in my book. He's in Children of the Beast.
Okay, so you've been to his house.
I've never been to his house, but I know somebody. Okay, so the guy from Iron Maiden, the singer from Iron Maiden, makes this movie called Crowley, about Crowley. And the director went to see the two sons of York, who look kind of like aristocratic ancestors of their daddy.
And they've got 3 nipples.
I'm not surprised. Well, Gerald York, Crowley is rumored to have filed his teeth down into points. And there's a picture of York, and their grandfather might have done that. But York's a very important follower, really important Children of the Beast. He's in a very important element. Anyway, just to give my story is, Dickinson does the movie about Crowley, which is really, there's a guy Shrapnel in there who acts is really good as Crowley. So there's some real problems with the movie, but the guy who plays Crowley at Hastings is excellent. He's an excellent actor. He really captures this kind of seedy old drug addicted man. And there's a scene there where he gets a letter from Parsons and he opens it up and there's no money and he has a little tantrum. It's really funny. But Dickinson's, the director, went and saw the York family at their estate. And they did this test on the director to see how superstitious he was, because they had one of Crowley's wands. Yes. And they chucked it up in the air at him to see if he would catch it or not. Like if he was really freaked out, they wouldn't catch it. I guess they'd done the test on other people, but he caught it and they're hanging out. And I remember he's it's like almost a perfect example of the English system. Like they say there, I think it was Hobsbawm who said the differences between the elite and the working class were so pronounced back in the 19th century that the elite were about 4 inches or 5 inches taller.
Yeah.
And so these are tall people. The York kids, the boys they're my age now, 50. But it's an interesting sequence. I'll try to repost it. I'll try to send you a thing online because I do have the video for that. And it's a really interesting exchange, but I'm sorry to interrupt. It's a long background.
The reason I was telling you my name droppy story, apart from so I could name drop the fact that I by the way, I held Crowley's wand.
So you held that same wand, probably.
Yeah.
So it's kind of ornate and it has a face on it. Wow. Okay.
Very heavy.
Yeah.
But you see, it has no power. It's all the. I wasn't affected by it. It wasn't, I didn't get evil emanations from it. It's gone.
But you're not superstitious. So did they toss it at you to see if you would catch it?
No. He said, "Do you want to hold Crowley's wand?" And I said, "Well, I'd be mad not to, wouldn't I? Because how can I turn down an opportunity like this?"
Right.
It's become an anecdote. But also in his collection is a picture that Crowley did, a kind of bad oil painting of these cowled figures walking on this path in some uplands somewhere, and they've probably got an inverted cross in front of them or something. I can't remember, but I remember the title of the painting. It's called "Pilgrims on the Road to Nowhere." So when you were talking about the Pilgrim Society, I was thinking. And I'm looking now at the membership of the Pilgrim Society from as on Wikipedia, and listen to this: Henry Kissinger, Caspar Weinberger, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Lord Carrington, Alexander Haig, George Shultz. And yeah, patron of the society is Charles III. This is the thing. When you do the thing that we do, you're going down the rabbit hole. You realise that there are these set of characters that one is encouraged to think of as distinguished figures, that by whether by having had eminent careers or merely by accident of birth, whatever, these figures are important. You should know about them, but they are distinguished rather than, say, malevolent or malign or frankly toxic. And I'm looking at those names and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm just thinking another thing. The Pilgrims connected influential families in the US, such as the Astors, DuPonts, Rockefellers, Carnegies, Morgans, Vanderbilts. So we are talking about some of the 13 satanic bloodline families.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's an interesting, and they overlap with the Knights of Malta too, which I've done another study on. But,
who are also basically evil central, aren't they?
Well, it depends on how you see it. They're very powerful. They're very quiet. They're public, just like the Pilgrim Society. You can find out a lot. You may not be able to find out the members. The reason people knew about the membership is somebody went to a library and got the membership of the Pilgrim Society and put it into a library in the UK. And then somebody else went and got them, photocopied them, and put them online. But they are all very powerful people. The Dulles brothers, too, were involved. Actually, Himmler's a member of the Knight of Malta, right? So you have this guy who's running his own knighthood under the SS. It's just the power central and the centralization of power and this kind of bloodline ideas and they're almost all aristocrats. They just changed after the Knights of Malta are 1,000 years old, going back to the Crusades. Just last year, they changed their constitution to allow non-bloodline members to hold higher office. But it is interesting because it ties in. It may not be the theme of our show, Secret Society. Well, it's kind of a secret society. Yeah. But some of these Knights of Malta are all over Trump's administration. Like his spokesperson's dad, her name is Alina Habba. Her dad is a chancellor of the American Knights of Malta. Like, you cannot make this up.
You know who else was a Knight of Malta?
I don't know.
Jimmy Savile.
Right, that's right. There's a picture of him with the Maltese cross in front of the king or the queen.
No, you think about that. You think about that, William.
Charles III is too. Charles III is a member of the Knights of Malta.
Okay, but so we were always told that this was a guy from the northern club scene. He was a kind of Jack the Lad, a promoter, who jumped onto the pop music scene at an early stage. You know, he was ahead of the game, and he made his career. How did this working class thug, basically made good, how did he become a Knight of Malta when it's supposed to be exclusive? Things that we're told just don't add up, do they?
Some kind of thing, man. They get brought up. Like, there's the aristocrats find people who are useful and bring them up into their realm. And that's kind of like the oldest story in the book, is like you have these landed estate people with tons of money and connections, and they're all, lords and manors and barons and all this other stuff. And then they find these intelligent guys, just like the Queen's relationship with John Dee, or these other elitist relationship with Crowley, or the Romanovs and Rasputin.
John Dee. Was it John Dee, or am I confusing with Francis Bacon? No, maybe it was Bacon, who was reputed to be the illegitimate son of Elizabeth.
Bacon. Bacon was like
Lord Verulam.
Yeah, no, Bacon was rumored to be like the bastard child of one of the kings, right? Or something like that.
I thought he was. He may have been the son of Elizabeth I. Anyway, I suppose what I'm hinting at is that it may not be the case that these characters are as ordinary working class as you think. So you think about how many bastards there were all these royal kids with Fitz in their surname because they were born on the wrong side of the tracks. We can't necessarily know that Savile was the ordinary working class lad that he was sold to us as. Maybe he was,
right?
Because they like their bloodlines.
They do. It ties them together. So I think so. I mean, it's the same thing about Obama, right? You find out later that Obama's related to the Bushes, right? So even though he's half black, there is a relationship to the Bush. There he is. And he can say he knows all the Masonic code words, and he puts them in the speeches, and he knows people from Skull and Bones. So he's kind of a privileged son.
Oh, sure.
That looks independent, I mean, he's really a great creation. He's really a front, in my opinion. He's not that bright, but they make, they make them privileged. They did the same thing with Bill Clinton here. Like, Bill Clinton is supposedly, he's sold to the public as this kind of son of a woman who was working as a barmaid. Well, he may be a Rockefeller, is really closer. He may be Winthrop's illegitimate bastard son, which makes way more sense because for some reason, Bill Clinton comes out of Little Rock, Arkansas, gets to Georgetown, then becomes a Rhodes Scholar and gets into Yale Law School. Like, these are this is really hard. Like, there's a lot of competition. How does he get taken care of? And all of his sexual proclivities get covered up all his whole life. And then George Bush is dying in a hospital, and who's there to see George Bush Sr., Poppy, aka Magog, die, but his own son, George W. Bush Jr. and Bill Clinton is there. It's incredible.
I was thinking as you were saying that, Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar, and who, of course, founded the Rhodes Scholarship, Cecil Rhodes, who was one of the founding members of the Pilgrim Society, was he not?
Very close. The
Milner Group I'm thinking of.
But that's what I was going to say. The Milner Group is supposedly the Pilgrim Society. So it goes from Rhodes to Milner to them. They've kind of washed themselves. They tried to make the Pilgrim Society look more independent, like they're trying to camouflage it, but it's the Milner Group, is my understanding, which makes it an even more vitally important place to understand the power dynamic, because the Anglo-American establishment dominated the 20th century. It's not deniable, because what happened after World War II is the kind of decline of the potency of the British Empire, while the U.S. attained global power to this day. Really, it's really a unipolar potency. England or Europe was exhausted, but the U.S., they achieved everything Hitler really wanted to. It's kind of a dark reality, but you want to talk about global empire, the U.S. just did incredible things. Most people cannot comprehend how the U.S. was involved in so many overthrows and, dominated.
So much bad shit.
We're terrible.
We're brought up to think of ourselves as the good guys, and we ain't.
When you look at the real history of the U.S., well, the U.S. has always been at war. I think there's been 10 years we're not trying to kill somebody, but actual real peace. But the kind of stuff we were involved in, Iran, Central America, we put in all the prime ministers of Mexico through the CIA. It just sub-Saharan Africa, tinkering with, where the list goes on. Indonesia was a huge place. South America, it was Nelson Rockefeller's involved. There's all these operations. We overthrew Chile. The first 9/11 was the overthrow of Allende in 1973. It was 1973 on September 11th, of all things, which is really the shock doctrine. It showed how you could pinpoint an overthrow without that many people dying. It wasn't like somebody went in and just wiped out the whole population. They just were able to, through propaganda and media, really overthrow and install Pinochet pretty easily. I think the copper mine. There was actually one of the one of Allende's really good book is The Ghost of Sheridan Circle, because one of Allende's cohorts was murdered in D.C. It was really the only assassination, strangely, in a domestic soil in D.C. was Allende's sidekick, his name was, I can't remember, but he was blown up by Cubans, actually, believe it or not. Anyway, so the U.S. is really kind of a global power, and this Pilgrim Society is very important. And right now, just to finish off, understanding the Knights of Malta is very important too, because there's all, like Eric Prince is a Knight of Malta, and all these guys are Knights of Malta. There are a lot of what's called conservatives or Christians in the U.S. who are in power now under Trump.
Yeah, well, maybe we just talk briefly about that. You mentioned Tucker. Yeah. He's a what? Did you say
he's a member of the Pilgrim Society, according to the doc? His dad too.
Yeah.
His dad is I can't remember. He was a member of Voice of America, which is a known
CIA
propaganda CIA fund. Yeah. Well, so he's always been there. He said that he's been around. Like, there's all these people in the U.S. have weird connections to the CIA that then abruptly stop. Like Vanderbilt, his name is. This is another one they like because he's part of the bloodlines. He's on the left though, so. Like this left-right dichotomy or thing is a lot of it's just stage acting, but it's what's the guy's name, Sterling or whatever. It's the Vanderbilt kid who's with MSNBC. I can't remember his face. Anyway, I think that Tucker was kind of the chosen one of the right too. So his name is, I think, Tucker Swanson something Carlson, but he's part of like a big. The Swanson is like a frozen food magnet, like so he's like a rich kid. Yeah, he was kind of funny. Well, interesting story, kind of how out of touch some of these rich kids are. Tucker Carlson went to go interview Vladimir Putin, and he was walking around. He's walking around Moscow, like, oh wow, this is a really beautiful place. Look at these shopping carts. You can stick a quarter in here, and then you get to use the shopping cart. Well, that's the way it's always done. You could tell right away he had never gone shopping for himself. You could just tell, like, he didn't know how to use a shopping. In so many of these stores, if you go shopping for yourself, you're going to run into these carts where you have to pay a quarter to pull it out and take it. Like, for him, that was like a real insight. And I was like, you just gave yourself away, Tucker.
It's such a shame, though, William, that Tucker is not our guy. Because he's so charming, he's funny, he says so many things that we like to hear. He sort of points out, I'm a bit skeptical about these death jabs that they've been forcing on us, and hey, maybe the war in Ukraine isn't quite as it has been presented to us in the rabid Western, we must destroy Putin media and so on. So he says these things, but you're right. I mean, once you understand that he is a pilgrim, he's the elites that think of us as useless eaters.
The slaves shall serve, just like Crowley said. It's a little bit different. Like, he's from a different background. And these meetings that they have are like, they're all the ambassadors for both parties. So the ambassador to the St. James's Court from the U.S. to the U.K., and then the ambassador from the U.K. to the U.S. It's there. And then these are ornate, like elite, super exclusive clubs and stuff like that the average U.S. person would never know. So like the fact that he's not disclosing, I mean, if he disclosed it, it would discredit him, right? Because he's friends with all these other big players. He's going to meetings with the elites and aristocrats, and maybe even King George III, or Charles III, excuse me.
Charles III.
And he's not disclosing that. He comes off as like this. He has a very good public figure. Like, he's out fly fishing, and he's supposedly a woodworker. I don't know if you've seen the picture of him woodworking. Like, he's in Maine, so it's like he's a rugged guy, like just the middle class. And somebody who really does woodworking saw him in this picture with the woodworking stuff and said, he's got everything out of place. He doesn't know what the hell's going on. This is a stage set.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah, it's not. And I believe that he's actually correct.
You'll be telling me next that there's pictures of Putin killing a polar bear and bare-chested on horseback.
AI, right?
Do you think they're faked? I don't know. I don't think so.
But I mean, here's the thing: is something's happening, James, here in the States. I don't know if it's happening over there, but a lot of strange people are popping up in the kind of new media that I've clawed myself to the middle. But a lot of people have like come into this new media with very sus backgrounds, like Carlson, really, who left, supposedly left Fox News. He has a good story of leaving Fox News. Like, I was fired. Maybe that's true. but like he's a dominator in this media. There's the other guy, Sean Ryan, who's like only has 150 episodes and like is in the top with Rogan. And Rogan has a lot of real curious people around him with, I'll just say Intel backgrounds. So you kind of wonder like who's making these ideas? Are these guys I had a show recently on how independent is the independent media. I think that's an important question.
Yes. I'm afraid I'm suspicious of a lot of these characters.
Here's another one. Can I quote York? You mentioned York. I think it's great that you know York because in most of my interviews, nobody ever mentions Gerald York. He's one of his. I wonder if the York family has the picture that Crowley made of Gerald York with fangs, because he did do a portrait of Gerald York. But this is interesting, York, his experience. There's really good pictures of Gerald York out there on Google, by the way. Aleister Crowley was the most colorful man of his day. Whatever Crowley was, he was not a charlatan. He believed, he worked, he suffered, he had power. He failed to put over the religion of Thelema in his lifetime, which, considering its nature, is not surprising. The Christian world regards him as one of the devil's contemplatives. His few friends will not see his like again, but his still fewer disciples mourn the passing of a magus.
Yeah. I wonder if John Fowles... Have you read The Magus by John Fowles?
I'm familiar with it, but I need to read it. No, I have not.
All these people, you see, this is the thing. It's very, very hard to find a public figure in any field who doesn't trace their power and influence back to this kind of diabolical pact in some way or another. I mean, for example, a few years ago, I discovered the writings of Somerset Maugham. I mean, he writes like a dream. He's very readable.
Crowley Connection, the magician.
I think he's got I think he was the best-selling author of the 20th century, even. And he was a fantastically successful playwright. But Maugham, I'm sure, made his pact fairly early on. Do you think?
Yeah, I do. I think he knew Crowley. I think he might have been influenced by Crowley more than you would think. Another famous writer from the U.S. who knew Crowley and had his books that may have not been divulged. How much he knew about Crowley was H.L. Mencken. It's kind of like...
was he? You see, you think of H.L. Mencken as this kind of freelance wit. That's what he's known for. It's like Mark Twain. And you look at Mark Twain and you think that guy was dodgy as fuck.
33rd degree Mason.
That's it. You see, it's a big club and we're not in it.
Yeah, I'm not initiated at all. But it's interesting to see how many of these people are. Do you know that Crowley inspired Maugham's book, The Magician?
Now you mention it, I do, but I forgot. Yes, of course.
Let me see if I can find some quotes.
And that may be in the moment where... I mean, he was prodigiously successful.
Yeah, he was.
A certain point in his life. He's extraordinary. He had multiple plays on in the West End simultaneously.
Right. This is what Crowley said about Maugham and the magician. I was not in the least offended by the attempts of the magician to represent me as, in many ways, the most atrocious scoundrel, for he had done much more than justice to the qualities for which I was proud. He attributed to me certain characteristics which he meant to represent as abominable, but were actually superb. The magician was, in fact, an appreciation of my genius, such as I had never dreamed of inspiring.
I'm going to have to read The Magician.
And he wrote something, I think he wrote something about the magician in, what was it? Vanity Fair, which was here. I mean, it's really something else.
What the magazine?
Yeah. Here's Maugham recollecting Crowley. Quote, I took an immediate dislike to him, but he interested and amused me. He was a great talker, and he talked uncommonly well. In the early youth, I was told he was extremely handsome, but when I knew him, he had put on weight and his hair was thinning. He had fine eyes and a way, whether natural or acquired, I know not, of focusing them that, when he looked at you, he seemed to look behind you. He was a liar and unbecomingly boastful, but the odd thing was that he had actually done some of the things he boasted of. At that time, I knew him. He was dabbling in Satanism, magic, and the occult. There was just then something of a vogue in Paris for that sort of thing, occasioned, I surmise, by the interest that was still taken in a book by Huysmans, La Basse. Crowley had told fantastic stories of his experiences, and it was hard to say whether he was telling the truth or merely pulling her leg. During that winter, I saw him several times, but I never, after I left Paris, to return to London. Once, long afterwards, I received a telegram from him, which ran as follows, quote, "Please send £25 at once. Mother of God, I am starving. Aleister Crowley." I did not do so, and he lived on for many disgraceful years.
Yeah, I think he's probably concealing some information there. I think there's something suspicious about the amount of worldly success that Somerset Maugham, and his fluency. It's kind of the gift of dark forces, I think. Well, so, William, we must chat again because you're fond of information, and I know that there's loads and loads of stuff that you know, and we haven't scratched the surface. But tell me just briefly about your development. You had a career as a lawyer, didn't you? Before, were you a normie? Did you believed in all the stories?
I was the most naive person on earth. I believed everything was told in my history books and TV. I used to actually watch CNN thinking I was getting informed. Like, that's how crazy it was. But, just watching light come through the kind of veil, so to speak. And then I just realized, man, they're lying about everything. So I was actually...
So what happened?
I went to lived in DC from 95 to 98, and I saw people like literally turn up dead in parks and stuff that aren't reported in the media. People falling off bridges and dropping off, like suicides off of apartment buildings, like crazy, like happening a lot and not hitting the media. And I was like, these are all very important. One was Vince Foster. I don't know if you've heard that story, but
I have. I'm not going to mention who might have killed him because I don't want to be on the death list.
Yeah, well, you could. I mean, the reality is that these characters are play for keeps. And that was kind of the thing. And then 9/11, I believed the events as I was told. And then there were like chinks in the light came through. And that was really it. Like that was probably, 34 or something like that. And that's when I really kind of I realized I didn't really know the true history of anything. I had to do a lot of reading myself. Because I had a conventional education in the U.S., state run. Like I wasn't one of those people who went to Yale.
You weren't elite.
Not even close. I'm from Nebraska, which is like the middle of no. You know what the N and the hat for N in Nebraska? Do you know what that N stands for? Knowledge. That's like a Nebraska. There's tons of Nebraska jokes. The best thing out of Nebraska, I-80, like taking I-80, which is the
route
freeway
out.
that goes.
Yes.
It literally goes straight across Nebraska through Omaha. I like Nebraskans. I'm from Nebraska. I'm a Cornhusker. But anyway, I was I just did what I told. That was like what you're supposed to do. Like, oh, I got my state education. I got a degree. It's like the classic story. And then you're like, what are they keeping out? They took so much stuff out of libraries, and like when the leftist analysis of a lot of the stuff that's left out is right. Like I wouldn't consider myself a pure left winger, but a lot of the stuff about class, persistence of class is real for me. The kind of calcification of the system and the ability to treat you with contempt, like the slave shall serve like Crowley's really real. But so anyway, so it was a long process. The internet is really crucial. Was really crucial to my development. If I didn't have, I went through and watched almost every like 9/11 video, documentary. This is even, my first book was published in 2010. So I was doing a lot of research, not as even a public figure. In my first book, I literally have it right here. This is Prophet of Evil. I printed it out on a printer. Like I didn't even have a publishing company in 2010. So it's kind of been like that development was like a standard education and then kind of like the real parapolitical education, which I think is really the real truth, the assassins and the governmental overthrows of states all around the world. Like they're just not focused on it on TV. It's all sound and fury and signifying nothing on the TV here in the States. So it's just like it's like a curtain in the Wizard of Oz. Like when you get past the curtain, you're like, whoa, the real mechanics are even scarier.
Well,
Like how they've been rigging the history of the United States for decades. So it's a scary place to be, because then, like you say, there's this huge division between the normies and then people like me. I'm not even like we started this with this conspiracy notion. All the stuff I can do talk about is factual, just like what I've shared to you. These are all factual quotes. Children of the Beast has like 700 footnotes, but like I can verify all the stuff that there's something else different going on. And it makes it scary for like how much of these people, like me, formerly most naive person on earth, I think that's fair. Like how many of these people's mind space is just like gummed up with nonsense, like stuff that isn't true.
Well, do you find it helpful in your sort of outreach program that you come from a kind of straight background? I mean, you're a lawyer.
I'm still a member of the state bar. Yeah, I'm still a member of the state bar in California. I've been a member since 1998.
Do you practice?
No, because I would have to become an active member. So I'd have to pay more money. But I practiced for like 6 years. So I wouldn't say I was a great lawyer, or I really enjoyed it. I didn't really like law school, actually. But
do you even trust the system now?
What's that?
Do you even trust the system?
My trust has only declined over time. And it's the judicial system in the United States is corrupt to the core.
Yes.
As an attorney, I mean, it's really bad to say that. I could possibly get in trouble for that, but you don't know who's taking bribes, who's connected to whose family members are getting enriched. It's really grotesque. It's almost like some kind of like banana republic. Like, and on the surface, it doesn't look like that. And I think that's intentional. But like, there's people in offices who shouldn't be there. There's blackmail. There's all kinds of like petty stuff going on. And a lot of these judges are installed for political partisan purposes. They're not the best and brightest. Some are. Some of the guys in the Supreme Court are Alito and these other characters. They're really something. They're super geniuses. But then these ones who are diversity, inclusion, and equity, they should find a different career, really. They shouldn't be put in for, because of their gender or race. It's the worst thing possible. And it degrades the whole system. So corrupt. I don't know if you're following current news, but like some dingbat in the sticks at some federal court is like overturning the will of the president. Like, this is lunacy. Like, it's crazy. And they're doing it for political reasons. They're just finding some baloney rationale. And you can see some of these other people, like, they're dumb. Like, there's literally people in the judiciary who can't even figure out there's 5 articles in the American Constitution. They've had discussions with some of these people in the Judiciary Committee with these lawyers, and you're just like, did you do any reading? How did you pass the bar? And they've dumbed down this. I mean, this is a whole nother show. They've dumbed down the system here. When I took the bar in 1998, it was a 3-day test. And so now they've degraded it to a 2-day test. And because it's supposedly racist or exclusionary or what, that's the point. It's supposed to be exclusionary. It's
supposed to be racist and exclusionary.
I don't know if it's racist or whatever, but at least you're supposed to be brilliant to be doing complex work. Like, that's the same thing. This isn't just the law. It's for flying a plane, taking a boat around the world, doing surgery. It's supposed to be exclusionary. You want somebody, this is a life or death thing. You get some bum in there, you're going to have planes flipping over, bungled. Now the whole system, it's pervaded the corruption. So when I say corruption in the judiciary, it's corruption in the whole system, and the values have been inverted into something else different, which isn't part of our
thing. Is though, it becomes easier or less stressful maybe when you reach the point where you realize that none of this stuff is accidental. It's all by design. It's designed to fail. It's not an aberration. This is how they, the people who are running the world and running down our world, this is how they operate. They're trying to destroy our everything that gives us a semblance of a functioning life. They want to take it away from us.
Yeah, I think you're right.
They want bad law to prevail. They want incompetence. They want corruption. And it sort of takes the pressure off. You realize,
it's liberating when you know it's totally corrupt. Like here, I literally think the American people have been enslaved. Like that's the whole like land of the free, home of the brave. When you're paying half of your money to the government and then they just steal it and give it to their friends, like billions and James, there's hundreds of billions of dollars missing in the United States, if not trillions.
Trillions.
There's trillions missing and stolen, and nobody's doing anything about it. And you have these people in the judiciary that are part of this cartelized thing where, like I'm saying, like it's like a banana republic. They're forestalling or they're not. Like they had a stolen. We had a coup in 2020, and none of the Betty in the judiciary had the spine to look into these things. We also had all these issues going on with censorship. They've bungled that too. These are huge events. This is why you go to law school, so that you go into the judge and then you have these different, like you're supposed to want to bring in these difficult issues and look at all the facets and come out with a judgment. They didn't even do that. They dropped the ball on no nonsensical, and the dissensions are really good too. But from some of these guys like Alito, like, what the hell are you guys thinking? But they did it on standing and stuff. Like, everybody who exists is getting hurt by this. For like, the standing is there. Like, the people, like, the censorship was actually kind of a pretext. It actually had a lot to do with money. They don't want these people to make money. They want all the money for themselves. So the censorship is actually almost like a camouflage for the real attempt, which is make sure that you're eating out of a garbage can. So there's definitely a harm. And I mean, from a legal standard, you are mystified. And one of the weird things, too, is like how little of the legal profession is like, guys, there's something really, 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 really wrong here. There's something super wrong. It's almost like we're in a psycho-civilized environment where people are too afraid. You can't get up and tell the truth and have free speech without somebody trying to hit you in the head with a literal or figurative hammer. Like, it's off the charts.
You mentioned the 2020 coup, and that was the beginning of my real journey down the rabbit hole. I mean, I'd been part of the way there before because I saw the whole global warming scam for what it was. So I was aware that massive fraud can take place in the public arena and not get reported on or acknowledged. But for some bizarre reason, what absolutely blackpilled me actually was when I saw the presidential election in the world's most powerful country being stolen in front of our eyes by an incontinent, senile, child-stroking crook, probably in the pay of China, with a son with his fingers in the Ukraine pie and in the Chinese pie, and just appalling stuff on his laptop. And when I saw this being covered up by big tech, I was sort of appalled. When I saw your judiciary, I mean, what are the checks and balances that one is taught to admire? I thought, no worries, guys. The Supreme Court is going to sort this out because they're amazing. They're Supreme Court. It's the land of the free, as you say. Land of the free, home of the brave. This is going to be sorted. It's going to be rectified. Don't worry. And then it didn't happen. But then the real shock for me was when the media, in which I'd spent my entire career, innocently imagining that I was speaking truth to power and I was in the service of the readership and stuff. The newspapers that I'd worked for were just not reporting on this. They were going, yeah, well, Trump lost because he was just vulgar and unpopular. And meanwhile, this likable, statesman-like Biden, who's going to be the president. I was thinking, hang on a second, what about the solidity? What about this guy shits himself? He's a child molester. That was the point where I sort of thought, well, all bets are off. Nothing I believed in formally can be on the table anymore because it's all potentially a massive lie.
It's incredible.
It
And
is.
if the America falls, if it fell this last election, the whole world would have just reverberated in turmoil too. If not just
Yeah, but it has, William, it has kind of fallen because
Kind
as
of has, yeah.
as you've acknowledged, all the people in this new administration, this kind of, we're going to remedy all the bad stuff that happened under Biden, they're all kind of Luciferians. They're all pretending to be Christians, and they're all actually working for these satanic secret societies, just from a different angle.
Trump knows a lot more than he talks about. His references, the golden age, ties into Bailey possibly. Like it overlaps. These are not Christian terms. He knows about the Tesseract, which is really kind of a more initiated kind of concept, this notion of a box within a box, like the slave shall serve. If there's a visual representation of it, it's the Tesseract, which is why the memorial for 9/11 has the boxes within the boxes. That's what they're saying to each other. We have you all under control. Trump knows about that. He's not divulging it to the public, and he thinks of himself as like the golden guy.
Well, doesn't he worship Apollo, I think?
Something like that, yeah, which is like,
He's not God.
Yeah, if you see kind of like how he's decorated his mansion or his penthouse in New York City, you kind of like, whoa, this is not Christian. Which, I mean, as a Christian, it kind of makes you wonder. But yeah, I think that we're in trouble. Like, you don't see the war. Like, I'm going to stop the war day 1. We're at like day 60 now, right? So this World War III, I mean, the Russians just did a full offensive in Kursk. So the war is not over. And then as things are going bad in the Middle East, like, you're supposed to dial it back. And like, when you say you want to be a peacemaker, well, make peace. Do whatever you do to make peace and stop this.
But that ain't going to happen because it is written. I mean, Albert Pike was predicting this. You know, he mapped it out, didn't he? In the mid 19th century, this is going to be the next war is going to be we're already in the next war, of course. It's an information war so far, but the hot war is in the Middle East.
Excellent point. We are in World War III, so it's just not as overt as maybe the other wars are. But all the preliminaries were hostilities. The Russians are going to be permanently angry for a generation about what happened to them. There's drones bombing their homes. There's third-party kinetic, like Muslim terrorists bombing people up. The Americans don't ever see that because we're in a total information bubble. So when you say information war, it's there. We're already in a World War III. So people need to wake up and stop it and pull out of it before it escalates. Like people who were in World War II and I, they didn't understand what was happening in these escalation ladders. They didn't get it. They were, there's this little skirmish. Oh, Hitler's moving over here. Then Poland. They didn't see how it was ramping up. And World War I was ramping up with this whole, the deployments and stuff like that. Well, that's what's happening now. So if you understand history, unless it gets drawn back, it's going to get way worse. Way worse.
Well, given that they use the same playbook over and over again. I mean, 9/11 was a rerun of Pearl Harbor with a few variations, but war is their mechanism by which they enforce their sort of disaster capitalism, the boom and bust cycles that they like to generate so that they can clean up after when everything's been destroyed. Well, we'll sort of draw it to a close now because I'm thinking we should come back and have another chat sometime.
Sure, anytime, love to.
But hello,
I'm here. I just did. You kind of are coming in.
That was a bit abrupt. I was thinking. I didn't mean end just like that.
No, I'm not ending. I'm trying to get the connection to get better because you're coming in and out for me.
Oh, sorry. You're a Christian.
100%. Yeah.
I mean, it's written in the Bible, in Revelation, that we ain't gonna. It doesn't come easy towards the end. We have to go through a lot of blood.
Yeah.
And
That's
turmoil. True. Do you see any? I mean, do you think we are in those times?
We're definitely getting into those times. I've told other people in other shows, like, how do you think that Armageddon would happen? Like other people looking in the past are like, oh, there's no way Armageddon. Now all the pieces are in play for some kind of like entire war. Everybody's looking at the Middle East. There's a genocide going on there now. So, I think from the biblical perspective, you're right. It only gets worse before the end of history. I mean, the Bible says every living human, if God didn't intervene, there would be no flesh left on the earth. So
yeah, that's not going to be fun. I mean, I like the bit where Jesus comes back, but the bit before, not so much.
Yeah, and I think that the kind of psycho-civilized population, it's kind of like before they say there'd be the days of Noah, right, before the end of the earth. And I think that you can interpret that in a lot of different ways. So you see that massive corruption that's happening right now in civil society. I think that's it. But also, like, they don't see it coming. They don't see the flood coming. So Noah's sitting there dutifully making the ark. But, like, the rest of the world's like, well, no, let's just do what we want. Marriage and giving in marriage, just like Christ said, I think. I think it's Matthew. I can't remember. But you see that happening, playing out. So maybe the events that they're foreshadowing you don't see, but you see the kind of predicate to the biblical event. Right. For me, I see it right in front of my face.
Yeah. That's why I read my scriptures every day. Because you're on something rock solid there. Yeah, you have a rock in a otherwise uncertain world.
We can quote scripture like that. Who builds upon this rock? Well, what's the quote? The winds shall come and the waves shall come, but you'll never, get set aside. So, I mean, I think that the Bible is the answer. The New Testament, scripture, coming to know Jesus, the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth is it. So people should get their Bibles out and read it again. Read the New Testament, or you can listen to it. One of my favorites, actually, I would recommend to the listeners, one of my favorite guys who reads the Bible is a Brit from the UK, David Suchet.
David Suchet, yeah.
Souchet.
Such.
Okay, sorry. My apologies.
Played Poirot.
He's one of my favorite guys to listen to.
He's a good reader.
Yeah.
Can I put in a word for the Old Testament as well? I mean,
sure.
The Book of Psalms is. I read the Book of Psalms every day. And Jesus loved the Book of Psalms. He's always the Book of Psalms. He quotes Psalms more than any other book from the Old Testament. And if it's good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. Anyway, William, tell us about where we can find your podcast, where we can write. Tell us about your books and where we can get them. And
well, we've covered some of the books today. We did Prophet of Evil and Children of the Beast. So those were published 2010. I'm on like third editions for both of them. I published Children of the Beast 2014. I can't believe it's been over 10 years. I also did a book on a satanic crime here in the U.S. called Abomination. It's known as the West Memphis 3. Pervades Hollywood culture. That's a whole nother interview. And then I did one on the Order of Nine Angles, which is another UK secret society that's kind of a spin-off of Crowleyism. And that's a whole nother story because it's really it's called Global Death Cult because it's global now because of the internet and travel. And it's actually, those ideologies have pervaded the far right here in the U.S. in a unexpected way. And then I wrote one about the smiley face killers, which was out in 2023. 400 pages.
We should talk about that next time, maybe. The smiley face thing was freaky.
It just got its name. It's really the phenomenon of young men. They just had another one in Bath, like Bath and that area is the epicenter. But also Manchester.
In the West Country, in England.
Correct.
Yeah.
But they just had another one. Like kids end up in the Thames all the time too. But they disappear after a night. They're usually found sometimes much later than they should be found. Like they should be found in 48 hours. But it's this phenomenon that really pervades the world. So I've done 2 documentaries on that, 1 book, and then I have another. If you're more of a visual learner, I would suggest seeing Prophet of Evil and Children of the Beast. You can watch them on my Patreon. I tried to upload them to Amazon during the Biden regime, so I should try again. Maybe Amazon will put them up now. But they're all 5 of my documentaries are available. A lot of pictures of Crowley and stuff like that.
Oh, that sounds good.
And the pictures that I mentioned to you of Crowley on his expeditions and some of these other characters and Gerald York are all in there in that. And you can see those on my Patreon. It's $5 a month. You just have to pay $5. You can watch all 5 documentaries. And then my podcast is, I think I'm over 1,300 episodes now. And I've covered a lot of these same topics. I was started off as a guest. Like I didn't have a podcast as listened to as it is now, but I did was putting a lot of my guests on there, my guest interviews, and then I started interviewing people as well. And you see a lot of different current topics and I've kind of focused on occultism because nobody else was really talking about it. Like I thought it was super important. I think it's like the undercurrent of what's going on in the world, but nobody really I think it's purposeful. They're not supposed to talk about it. It's not fashionable. And even the Christian church, which is really weird. But you can see so many of those discussions I have.
It's not so weird, William, because actually what the Christian church has done, well, I mean, for at least a century, is try and remove the supernatural from Christianity. So that's why they don't want to talk. They don't want to talk about good and evil and God and Satan.
True. I talk to pastors and stuff, and they're like, "You believe in demons?" I'm like, "Yeah, I believe in evil spirits. Hell yeah, I do. I believe in angels. I believe in everything that's in there.
Yeah,
I believe in Christ lives in some heavenly realm or whatever." So I'm in a minority, whatever. I'm trying to do my best, but yeah, you can check out my podcast, William Ramsey Investigates.
Okay, well, I'll put the links below. And dear viewers and listeners, if you've enjoyed this podcast, and how could you not? Do consider supporting me. You can support me on Substack and on Locals, on Subscribestar and Patreon. I try and spread it out so that if one of them goes down, at least I'll have an income stream somewhere else. So please support me if you can. If you don't want to commit to a subscription and get early access to my stuff, you can buy me a coffee. And you can support my sponsors and spread the word and tell everyone how much you've enjoyed this show. Thank you again, William. It's been lovely having you on the show.
Great to talk with you. Great to be with you. Thanks for the invite.
Global warming is a massive con. There is no evidence whatsoever that man-made climate change is a problem, that it's going to kill us, that we need to amend our lifestyle in order to deal with it. It's a non-existent problem. But how do you explain this stuff to your normie friends? Well, I've just brought out the revised edition of my 2012 classic book, Watermelons, which captures the story of how some really nasty people decided to invent the global warming scare in order to fleece you, to take away your freedoms, to take away your land. It's a shocking story. I wrote it, as I say, in 2011 actually. The first edition came out, and it's a snapshot of a particular era, the era when the people behind the climate change scam got caught red-handed, tinkering with the data, torturing till it screamed, in a scandal that I helped christen ClimateGate. So I give you the background to the skullduggery that went on in these seats of learning where these supposed experts were informing us, we've got to act now. I rumbled their scam. I then asked the question, okay, if it is a scam, who's doing this and why? It's a good story. I've kept the original book pretty much as is, but I've written 2 new chapters, one at the beginning and one at the end, explaining how it's even worse than we thought. I think it still stands up. I think it's a good read. Obviously I'm biased, but I'd recommend it. You can buy it from jamesdelingpole.co.uk/shop. You'll probably find that just go to my website and look for it, jamesdelingpole.co.uk. And I hope it helps keep you informed and gives you the material you need to bring round all those people who are still persuaded that, oh, it's a disaster, we must amend our ways and appease the gods, appease Mother Gaia. No, we don't. It's a scam.